Hey guys, tonight we're floating gently down the Euphrates into the misty streets of Babylon, where the bricks still hold the scent of yesterday's incense, and the air is warm like bread just pulled from an oven. It's too early for the sun, but not too early for you. You're already awake, of course, not by choice, by profession, because you're a perfumer. And in Babylon, that means your day begins with crushing resin before breakfast and ends with scented oil smeared on a nobleman's corpse. You live behind the perfumery, near the temple district, where the air is thick with competing smells: burnt barley from the breweries, dust from the construction site where someone's always just finishing the ziggurat, and the faint, stubborn tang of goat. Your eyes are still gummy with sleep when you sit up on your woven mat. The room is dark. Someone left a pot of sesame paste open again. There's a fly in it now, doing laps. You stretch. Something pops. It wasn't supposed to. And outside, somewhere beyond the mud brick walls, a rooster screams into the void, probably announcing that you, once again, won't be getting a proper breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. Drop that in the comments if you feel like it. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot across the cool floor, careful not to kick the amphora of tamanu oil that your apprentice left, dangerously close to the doorway. Again, you make a mental note to move it, then immediately forget. It's fine. You'll remember when you stub your toe later. The sky's still more night than day as you pull on your linen wrap. You splash your face with water from a chipped jug. It's cold enough to wake the dead, which is ironic, because you'll be making funeral perfume by lunchtime. Outside, the city is in that strange in-between, silent but alive. The scent of crushed myrrh still lingers in the alley from last night's distillation. You know because you made it. You always make it. 3 nights a week. The myrrh comes in on boats from Punt, or what people think is Punt, since historians still argue about where Punt actually was. Could have been the Horn of Africa. Could have been some mystical Trader Joe's of the Bronze Age. You'd pass by your garden. It's pathetic but loyal, just some spindly iris shoots, a struggling mint patch, and a very angry pomegranate tree that refuses to fruit but provides excellent shade for your cat. The cat is named Kumatu, which means simmer down in Akkadian. She does not live up to her name. You slide open the workshop door. It's heavy, smells of cedar and ambition. Inside, everything's exactly how you left it, cluttered, fragrant, vaguely magical. Your mortar and pestle rest near the window, still dusted with yesterday's gallop. Shelves line the walls, packed with jars labeled in the curling, blocky strokes of Sumerian cuneiform, because you trained under an old-school mentor who thought Akkadian script was too modern. There's one shelf you never touched, with recipes that are said to have driven a perfumer mad, or maybe just made him sneeze uncontrollably. The records are vague. You light a small oil lamp, goat fat, not ideal, but it burns clean. The room glows golden, and the shadows stretch like tired priests across the floor. You check the temperature of the oil vats, still cool. Good, you'll need them warm but not boiling. Last time you overheat the almond base, it smelled like burnt bread for days, and you still haven't lived that down. You reach for the day's first ingredient, labdanum, sticky, brown, and pungent. It clings to your fingers like bad decisions. You roll it gently between your palms, warming it enough to blend. Then it goes into the mortar, along with ground calamus root and a whisper of cardamom, just enough to make the blend feel luxurious but not scandalous. Your apprentice stirs behind you. She sleeps in the corner, wrapped in linen, snoring softly into a bale of cotton meant for infusion. Her name is Shamhat, and she's smarter than you were at her age, which is annoying. You consider waking her, but then decide to let her rest. It's not like anything catches fire every morning. You open the shutters. Outside, the sky has started to blush. The temples begin to hum low chanting, distant bells. The smell of warm stone and rose petals starts to curl into the morning air. Somewhere, a baker drops a tray. You hear the swear words float on the breeze. Classic Enlil district. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe in the stillness. The layers of scent built over years-old rose, ancient cedar, ghostly musk that clings to the walls. It smells like memory, like a city that never forgets. And now, with the day quietly gathering its weight, you step forward into the first grind, the first flame, the first fragrant promise of Babylonian daylight. The lamps flicker like tired fireflies as you move deeper into the workshop, the scent of warmed oils clinging to your skin. You're still groggy, but your hands know the rhythm. You set the small cauldron over the low brazier and begin feeding. It chopped cedar shaving slow even, like coaxing a secret. The goal is heat, not haste. Babylon rewards patience, except when it doesn't. The walls around you are thick with years of perfumed smoke, absorbing and echoing back old recipes. In every swirl, there's something sacred about it, until your neighbor sneezes through the shared wall and you remember that the divine shares real estate with the mundane next door. The temple bakers are already up, their kitchen butts up against your distillery, and their gossip leaks through the thin plaster like steam. Today's topic: someone allegedly stole a fig loaf offering and replaced it with dried lentils. Again, you can't help but smirk. You've done worse. Once, you swapped out a whole shipment of civet musk with crushed dates and nobody noticed for a month, though that might explain the high number of irresistible love spells that failed that spring. You pull a cloth over your nose and lean into your work. The goat fat from the lamps is starting to congeal in the corners, and while it keeps the insects away, it's not great for the vibe. You mentally add buy beeswax to your list. Right after don't forget to actually eat lunch today. The room begins to warm, and with it, the scents blossom. You adjust the lid on your largest pot inside. A base of ben oil gently infuses with crushed iris rhizome, thick and waxy. This blends for a noble woman's bath. She wants to smell like dreams and diplomacy, which you're still not entirely sure how to translate, but you're trying your best. Your first historical fact of the day comes to mind. Babylonian perfumers weren't just artisans, they were often associated with temple rituals, especially in the service of Ishtar. Fragrance was an offering, a seduction, a language. In a city where words were carved into stone, smell was soft power. A quiet rustle behind you. Shamhat stirs and sits up, hair a cloud of sleep and regret. Did we finish the spikenard blend? She mumbles. Yesterday, you say. You labeled it, definitely not snake oil. She blinks. Right, that one. You give her the measuring scales and point toward the cedar storage. She groans. You pretend not to notice. The next task, reblending a batch of damaged rosata. Someone definitely Shamhat left the lid off, and the top notes escaped into the workshop like secrets on the wind. What's left smells like old cushions. You add a touch of cassia and one drop, just one, saffron tincture. It's an expensive gamble, but worth it. The blend deepens immediately, like a harp note resolving. You hear hoofbeats outside. A donkey cart passes, probably the one that brings your imported resins from the port. You hope the driver's not late again. Last time, the styrax shipment was so overdue, you had to substitute pine tar and hope no one noticed. They did. One temple priest fainted mid-hymn. Shamhat is now humming softly as she measures out cassia pods, and you're briefly struck by the odd piece of the morning. The perfumery smells good, really good, and your hands are warm from the oil pots. You pause and take a breath. Historians still argue whether Babylonian perfumers were part of an official guild, or just extremely well-connected freelancers with incense-stained fingers. You like the idea of both. You do have a badge. Well, it's really just a clay tablet with your name on it and the word nose scratched in Sumerian. But it counts. You glance at the list of orders for the day. Some repeat clients, some temple jobs, one weird request, scented scroll case, no details. You assume they want something subtle, maybe lavender, or maybe they're trying to hide the fact that they store love poems in it. You've seen stranger. You pull a small tin of myrtle oil from the cooling shelf. It's mellowed overnight, just enough to start blending. You tap it with your finger. The smell is warm, green, faintly sweet. You can already tell it's going to pair beautifully with the bitumen, musk still aging in the crock. Bitumen musknap. There's a fringe tidbit for you. Not real musk, of course, since Babylon didn't have access to musk deer. Instead, they used slow-aged petroleum extracts from the riverbanks. Yes, your finest perfume may contain traces of fancy tar. Don't judge. Cleopatra would have worn it if she had the option. You cross to the far table where the copper distiller rests, lovingly polished but slightly dented from last month's accident involving a runaway grain sack. You prepare to reheat yesterday's final batch, a heavy blend of cypress and juniper bark meant for a temple dedication. It smells like crushed forests and serious money. As the room fills with steam and fragrant tension, you lean against the window ledge. The streets are waking now. Merchants shout. Children chase dogs. A priest in elaborate headdress pauses to sniff the air approvingly as he walks past your shopfront. You allow yourself a tiny, smug smile. Another day, another dose of controlled olfactory chaos. You hear her before you see Hertha, apprentice again, her sandals slapping awkwardly against the pavement, breathless from sprinting. The workshop door creaks open just as you finish sealing a jar of tamarisk oil. And there she is, cheeks red, curls half escaped from her braid, arms cradling a woven basket that is very obviously too full. I got everything, Shamhat declares, panting dramatically. Well, almost everything. You raise an eyebrow. There was a situation with the sandalwood vendor, she mutters, avoiding your gaze, but I handled it. You take the basket and begin inspecting the goods, mysticky and fresh. Cinnamon bark from the southern traders. Crushed blue lotus still wrapped in its cooling cloth. And wait, this isn't sandalwood, Shamhat, you say slowly, lifting a chunk of reddish wood that smells suspiciously like wet attic. It's similar, she offers weakly. The vendor said it had notes of confidence. It smells like moldy chair legs. She shrugs, clearly hoping you'll let it slide. You won't, not today, because today's blend is no ordinary mix-its for the Temple of Nabu, the god of wisdom, and his priests are fussy, more fussy than usual. This week they're preparing for a celestial alignment, and they want everything just right. The incense, the robes, even the placement of decorative pebbles, and of course, the scent blend. So yes, the wood matters. You sigh and set the imposter sandalwood aside. No time to argue. You'll dip into your private reserve, again, that tiny stash of real sandalwood, tucked behind a mislabeled jar of bad barley, that's fooling no one as you fetch it. You reflect, like every Babylonian perfumer before you want, just how international your job is. Most of your ingredients come from far beyond Babylon's brick walls. Frankincense from Arabia, cinnamon from India, maybe even Sri Lanka, cedar from Lebanon, and no one really knows where the blue lotus comes from. Maybe Egypt, maybe dreams. Trade routes pulse through your world like veins through a leaf. And you, standing here in your oil-splattered apron, are right at the aromatic heart of it. A merchant once told you that a single amphora of nard oil could pay for a house. You don't know if that's true, but it made you hold your nard jar a little tighter that night. Shamhat unloads the rest of the basket onto the counter. Cloves, civet pods, dried figs, bribery for later, and one shriveled tamarind that seems to have stowed away by accident. You begin sorting the lot, setting aside what's needed for today's blends. The rest you'll catalogue later unless you forget again, like last week, and find yourself elbow deep in mystery powder-labeled stuff. As you work, your hands move quickly, but your mind lingers on the markets. Babylon's bazaars are chaos, wrapped in sunlight. Historians still argue whether the larger market near the Ishtar Gate was organized by trade or just allowed to sprawl naturally, like a mildly ambitious vine. You've been there dozens of times, and you still don't know where anything is unless you follow your nose. You remember the aroma map you once tried to draw. Come in corner, the fishy side street, that guy who only sells imported gum resins, and curses like a sailor priest. It didn't help much, but it was fun. And it still smells faintly of spikenard. You inspect a sealed jar of elemi resin from the basket. It's waxy, slightly lemony. Good stuff. You'll use it in the body oil for the palace guards. Supposedly it inspires bravery. You suspect it just masks the smell of anxiety and chainmail. Outside. The morning is sliding into something hotter, lazier. The temple drums begin their noonday rhythms, low and repetitive, like a reminder that time exists and it's watching you. Somewhere, a donkey brays like it just learned about injustice. You ignore it. Back inside, you start preparing your workbench. The slab is slick with old rose oil, so you wipe it down with a cloth soaked in mint water. A trick your old mentor taught you, he said. It keeps the blends fresh. You think he just liked the smell of mint. Now it's time to prep for the afternoons. Major commission, incense cones for the prince. Not just any prince, the jumpy one, the one who swears his dreams are haunted by a pale woman, who smells like old pears and betrayal. He insists the right incense will banish her. You have doubts still. A paying job is a paying job, even if it involves spiritually fumigating someone's Dreams he grind up the frankincense and patchouli, carefully balancing with dried lavender and just a trace of vetiver. Too much, and it'll smell like a library caught fire. Too little, and it won't mask the ghostly pears as you pound the mix into powder. Shamhat offers unsolicited commentary about the prince's fashion sense, that robe with the fish scales, really, and you try to remember the last time you made a blend without someone hovering nearby, asking if it's supposed to smell like that. She offers to help roll the incense into cones. You let her, watching as she overworks the first batch and turns it into sticky triangles. Not quite ceremonial, but close enough. You hand her a mold, and she rolls her eyes like you're being dramatic. You are. That's the fun part. You've always found comfort in this part of the day where the ingredients are gathered, the recipes are sketched, and everything is full of potential. Later, things will go wrong. They always do. Someone will misread a symbol, a batch will curdle, a goat will break in. But now, everything is exactly as it should be. You slide the sandalwood reserve onto your shelf with exaggerated care. A whisper of incense powder drifts through the sunlight, and the day rolls quietly forward. The mortar's soft rhythm fills the room as you lean into the grind. Not metaphorically, literally. The basalt mortar is heavy, ancient, and slightly lopsided, which means if you don't press at just the right angle, everything flings out like an aromatic explosion. You've learned the sweet spot. Took years. Also took one permanent stain on the ceiling. This morning's blend is complexed in ingredients, each one moody in its own way. There's the slippery resin that sticks to everything but itself, the dried root that refuses to powder unless you bribe it with heat, and then the clove buds, crisp and smug, that pop when you least expect it. It's like grinding a group project into scent form. You turn the pestle in steady circles, letting the scent rise in gentle waves. First the sweet nip of cinnamon, then the deep resinous echo of benzoin, then something sharp, galbanum, probably, or possibly Shamhat's shirt, catching fire again. You glance over. She's fine. For now. This mixture isn't for a noblewoman or a prince. It's for the temple offering bowls, those little copper basins that sit near the altar, puffing incense into the air while priests chant and side-eye each other. You've made this blend dozens of times, but each batch is slightly different, like bread or dreams. Fun. Historical fact: Babylonian temples were not just spiritual centers, they were economic powerhouses, educational institutions, and arguably the best places to accidentally walk into a philosophy debate while trying to deliver a jar of rose oil. You pour the powdered mixture into a ceramic bowl, tapping the sides 3 times. It's a habit, superstition. No one told you to do it. You just started, and now you're afraid not to. Last time you forgot, a squirrel fell through the roof. Coincidence, maybe, but it landed in the distillation vat. Shamhat is now sweeping the corner with the energy of someone who's procrastinating something more important. Are we doing the cedar soak before or after the prince's cones? She asks. Before, you say, without looking up. Cool, she says, and continues sweeping the same square foot of floor. The cedar soak is essential. Freshly split cedar, steeped in hot oil for exactly the right amount of time, then combined with spikenard and iris to make a perfume that's meant to invoke calm, clarity, and the vague sensation that everything might be okay for once. It's used in rituals of forgiveness, and once by that noblewoman who wanted her house to smell like an apology. You fetch the cedar from your backroom stash, slicing it into thin slivers with your bronze blade. The smell hits immediately woody, bright, almost hopeful. You close your eyes and imagine a cedar forest, tall and silent, far from shouting vendors and spoiled goats. Then Shamhat sneezes and the illusion shatters. Still, it's comforting. A kind of olfactory therapy. You carefully lower the slivers into warm sesame oil, watching as the bubbles rise. The scent deepens, and the workshop air thickens with memories you don't quite have. Back in the Damining, like 1,000 years ago, give or take, this process would have involved big ceremonial gestures, chanting, maybe even a sacrifice or two. Now it's just you, Shamhat, and the same clunky stove that's been threatening to collapse for a decade. Progress, in its own smoky way. You stir the mixture slowly, noting the way the oil takes on the color of amber, the scent of ancient promises. This is the part that no one talks about: the hours of repetition, of heat and watchfulness. The kind of work that isn't flashy, but becomes sacred through consistency, through care. Historians still argue whether Babylonian perfumers followed strict formulas or improvised depending on ingredient quality, weather, or mood. You do a bit of both. You trust the recipe, but you trust your nose more. That's what makes you good. Well, that and the fact that you haven't set anything on fire all week. You decant the oil into a waiting amphora, one of the good ones, not the cracked ones you save for annoying clients. It's marked with a sunburst seal, indicating it's been cleared for ritual use. The priests are picky. They don't trust anything unless it's been boiled, blessed, or both. You wipe your hands on your apron. They smell like cedar and commitment. Shamhat, now done with her aggressive sweeping campaign, pokes through the spice jars. We still out of blue juniper. Used the last of it for the merchant's bath oil. You say the one who wanted to smell like victory in battle. Yep. How'd that turn out? Like pine trees with a superiority complex. She snorts and pulls out the lotus jar instead. Blue lotus, delicate, expensive, and prone to wilting if you so much as look at it funny. You've got maybe a handful left, and it's reserved for a very particular purpose. The mid-afternoon blend meant to ease sorrow and inspire dreams, which sounds poetic. But really, it's just a very fancy nap oil that you check the sun's angled through the window. It's almost time. The light is shifting, the warmth in the room softening. You can hear the buzz of flies growing louder, the smell of distant meat stalls wafting in. Noon approaches like a catalase, inevitable. Slightly judging. You begin cleaning up the workbench, resetting for the next phase of the day. More grinding, more boiling, more whispering to jars, as if they'll answer back. You reach for your notes, the ones written in your messy blend of Akkadian and shrugged. The next recipe is smudged, barely legible, possibly upside down. You frown. Maybe you should finally start copying things onto fresh tablets. Maybe tomorrow. The workshop is quiet again. Shamhat hums softly. The oil cools. Outside the world waits, and you, perfumer of Babylon, take a breath and step back into the grind. The scroll arrives with a smear of honey on the corner and a definite sense of panic in the handwriting. You recognize the stylets from Prince Ilshubi, the one with the very dramatic dreams and very little patience. His scribe's wax tablet outlines a new request, scribbled over what looks like yesterday's laundry list. Need new incense for tonight. Must be calming, but also commanding. Smells must not clash with moonlight. You blink. What does that even mean? Shamhat asks, reading over your shoulder. That the prince is having another dream crisis. You say, already pulling down your fastest blending resins, and that he wants to smell like a chill authority figure. This is not the first time the prince has made strange demands. 2 weeks ago, he requested a body oil that would help him walk without making enemies. The time before that, it was an incense to keep birds from judging him. You've learned to ask fewer questions. You start assembling the components. Something grounding myrrh, probably. Something clinging myrrh, if only you weren't out, maybe lemongrass. And something elusive, like spikenard, to keep it mysterious. Shamhat places a bowl of gum arabic paste on the bench. You'll use it to bind the powdered blend into incense cones. You glance at the sun. The blend has to cure for at least 3 hours before it's stable enough to burn. You've got 2.5 perfect. This is the part of the job that nobody thinks about: the rush orders, the last-minute miracles. Everyone imagines perfumers standing around in clouds of rose petals, sipping pomegranate wine and sniffing things. Nobody sees the frantic powder mixing, the burns, the guessing games about which batch caused that rash last month. You grind the frankincense a little harder than necessary. The scent kicks up bright, lemony, sacred. You once read that frankincense was worth its weight in gold, which is probably why Shamhat handles it like it's explosive. You add a trace of benzoin resinous and sweet, like cinnamon's older, wiser, kazanan, then a pinch of vetiver root, just enough to keep the scent from floating off into oblivion. It smells rich, commanding, a little foresty, like a monarch who composts. As you mix, you mutter the old mantra under your breath. A blend unbalanced brings chaos near. It's nonsense, but it's comforting nonsense. Like most advice from old tablets, you roll a test cone, flattening the base with your thumb, and set it in the drying tray. The first batch is always off. Too much moisture, too little cohesion. One time, the cones crumbled during a royal banquet, and someone accused you of sabotaging the appetizers. This batch holds good. Promising start. You roll 5 more. Shamhat helps, shaping hers with practiced precision. She's good at this part, better than you, honestly. If she weren't so easily distracted by pigeons and market rumors, she'd be terrifying. I think the prince has a crush on you, she says, not looking up. You almost drop the tray. No, he doesn't. He keeps sending you scrolls. And he called you Divine Nose of the East in the last one. I think that was a typo. Still counts. You ignore her and focus on the cones. Historians still argue whether Babylonian perfumers were allowed to refuse commissions from royalty. You've never tested that theory. You like your shop. You like your fingers. And you'd like to keep both. As the cones dry on the ledge, you turn to another part of the order. The scent sachets. The prince wants tiny pouches to place beneath his pillows. You mix crushed lavender with shredded rose petals and just a dash of cedar shavings. It's a sleepy blend, almost nostalgic. You imagine a younger Ilshubi, less worried about dreams, more focused on ... whatever princes focused on before their egos blossomed. You spoon the mixture into thin linen squares and tie them with twine. Simple, elegant, flammable. You make a mental note to include a do not light instruction in the delivery. You test one of the incense cones. It lights quickly, burns clean, and releases a scent that curls through the workshop resin, root, and something that almost smells like confidence. You breathe it in. Not bad. You feel marginally less anxious already, or maybe that's just relief. You package the cones into a carved box, one of your nicer ones, the one with the lapis inla hand. Wrap it in a silk cloth. You write a note in your neatest Akkadian to calm your mind and command your dreams. May the moonlight approve. You pause, then add a tiny smile mark. Just in case, the box goes into the delivery basket, and you hand it off to a temple runner, one of those teenage boys who somehow always smells like dates and enthusiasm. He salutes you with 2 fingers and bolts toward the palace. Shamhat watches him disappear down the street. You ever think about working in the palace full-time? She asks. You shake your head. Too much protocol, not enough mystery. She nods, but you can tell she's thinking about it. She likes shiny things. You like puzzles. The workshop returns to quiet. The air still holds the tail end of the prince's blend, mingled now with the lingering cedar from this morning. You close your eyes and breathe it in. Another order down. Another frantic message answered. You wonder, briefly, what he'll dream of tonight. Hopefully, not pears. The wooden clogs on the stone threshold announce her before she even speaks. A pause, then the clatter of gold bracelets, and the faintest sigh, half boredom, half practiced disdain. You don't even need to turn around. It's the royal nose. Good morning, you say, without looking up from your tray of partially dried spikenard coils. I smell iris. She replies, lips curled like a sphinx that just caught you lying, and a faint note of ... roasted onion. That's lunch from the courtyard, Shamhat mutters, sweeping a little too aggressively. The royal nose, real name, Kumatu, but no one dares use it, glides into the room in layers of gauzy linen and palpable judgment. She is the official scent taster of the palace, a woman with a sense of smell so sharp she claims to have sniffed out an assassination once. Whether or not that's true, you've seen her stop mid-sentence because someone across the street lit the wrong kind of incense. She takes a slow, delicate breath. You've been playing with Blue Lotus again. You nod. Just for a temple blend, nothing frivolous. You say that like temple priests aren't the most dramatic people in Babylon. Touché. She drifts to your shelf of sealed oils, fingers hovering but never touching. What's this one? She asks, pointing to a squat jar with a clay seal carved in the shape of a hedgehog. Experimental, you say. Lotus, fenugreek, and a drop of civet. She arches one impossibly elegant brow. For what purpose? I haven't decided. Yet, maybe memory, maybe madness. She hums non-committally. It smells ... risky. That's what makes it interesting. Fun historical fact. Elite Babylonian scent critics like Dumasinatu often wielded real power. Their approvals or disapprovals could elevate a perfumer's social standing or bury a blend in obscurity. Some even advised on marriage matches, based on compatible scent profiles. You once overheard her telling a palace matchmaker, if he wears ambergris in this weather, he's not ready for commitment. Dumasinatu stops in front of the workbench and lifts a cone from the prince's batch. She brings it delicately to her nose, closes her eyes, inhales. That's all, she says. You wait. Shamhat stops sweeping. Duma-Sina to places the cone back in the tray and turns to you. Not offensive. You blink. That's practically a standing ovation coming from her. She begins to leave, then pauses in the doorway. The Crown Prince Nabonidus, not Ilshobi, is seeking something for his upcoming ritual, a scent for power, for legacy. He wants to smell like a dynasty. You nod slowly. When yesterday, she says with a smirk, and disappears into the sunlight. Shamhat lets out a low whistle. She likes your cones. She didn't spit. You say, that's a win. You return to the lotus blend she was smelling earlier. It's been steeping for days in a jar lined with beeswax sliced petals, a hint of cardamom, a base of myrrh infused oil. The scent is heady, almost narcotic. Historians still argue whether blue lotus was used ceremonially or recreationally or both. You're inclined to believe both. It smells like something you'd wear to pray and to flirt. You stir the oil gently with a rosewood stick, watching the petals swirl like lazy dancers. Shamhat leans over your shoulder and inhales deeply. I'd wear this, she says. Not until your next bath, you reply, because the girl is currently wearing what smells like failed pepper paste. You bottle the lotus oil in thin vials, no labels, just a colored thread tied around each, blue for clarity, gold for seduction, red for you sparingly, unless you enjoy explaining things to temple guards. You tuck them into the cool shelf near the back of the workshop. That's where you keep the good stuff, the misunderstood stuff, the blends you make because they're beautiful, not because anyone paid you to. Outside, the city hums louder now. Mid-morning traffic, goats arguing with their owners, someone dropping a jar and swearing in perfect Sumerian. The sun pours through the workshop windows, gilding everything in a glow that makes even your cracked clay floor look divine. You check your tablet schedule. Next client, a local merchant with too much coin and not enough self-awareness. He wants a body oil that smells like the strength of Marduk and the softness of silk. Whatever that means, but that's later. For now, you sit. Just for a moment, the mortar cools under your hand. The scent of lotus still lingers in the air, thick and heady. You close your eyes and imagine Dumasinitu saying something actually nice. That might require an entirely new perfume category. You stoke the flame under the copper still, coaxing the heat until the water starts to tremble, not boil. The pot's ancient, patched 3 times, bottom scorched from that one unfortunate experiment with resin and too much wine. But it still works mostly. Today's task is delicate, boiling flowers. The lotus has been strained and dried. Now it's time to coax what's left into the base oil. You settle into the process with practiced calm, adding a few sprigs of marjoram and a sliver of costus root to round out the scent. It's a subtle blend, one of your more restrained recipes, which makes it tricky. Too much heat and it scorches. Too little and you get scented water. Congratulations, you've made expensive soup. As the pot begins to hiss softly, you whisper the old phrases, not full chants, just the fragments you remember. A line to Ninkasi, goddess of fermentation, a half-verse to Gula for balance. Maybe it's habit. Maybe you think the oil listens. Shamhat watches you from the doorway, a stick of licorice root dangling from her mouth like a lazy oracle. You know that's not the actual hymn, she says. You shrugged. The oil doesn't know that. The scent begins to bloom, a warm breath of steam rising from the still. It's floral, but grounded, sweet, but not naive. You let it simmer, counting your breaths, listening to the city beyond the walls. Fun fact, Babylonians didn't have soap the way we do. Cleansing was often done with oil and scraping tools, meaning perfume wasn't just for pleasure, it was part of the hygiene routine. If you didn't smell good, you were suspicious, dirty, possibly a criminal, or worse, gammon. You skim the top of the oil to check for impurities. None. A good sign. You tip in the final ingredient, a whisper of safflower, and seal the pot with a linen wrap. It will need hours to infuse properly, but the hardest part is over. The rest is patience. Shamhat, bored with watching steam rise, drifts over to the anointing table and begins rearranging the bottles. You hear soft clinks, the occasional muttered who labeled this mystery musk, and a loud sneeze. I opened the civet jar, she calls, still sniffling. You always do, you reply. The civet paste thick, musky, utterly foul in its raw form is tucked away in a sealed container, buried under cloth. It smells like the back of a festival tent and betrayal. But used correctly, in trace amounts, It creates a bass note that anchors an entire blend. That's perfume magic. You take something awful and make it transcendent. Historians still argue whether civet was used by Babylonians, or if it came later via Persian influence. You think it's possible. Trade routes were tangled, and Babylon had a habit of acquiring everything interesting and expensive, no matter how weird it smelled. The steam has settled now. You lift the lid slightly and take a cautious sniff. Lotus, marjoram, safflower, and that faint woody note from the costicids. Perfect. You beam. Shamhat claps sarcastically. You begin the blessing. Not a real one, more like a personal ritual. You pour the infused oil into a broad clay dish and set it on the altar shelf beneath the workshop niche where a tiny, soot-dark statue of Ishtar presides. Flanked by 2 winged lions and a very dusty fig, you light a bit of dried bay leaf beneath the dish and let the flame kiss the bottom. A tradition, probably unnecessary, but you've never skipped it. Not once. Shamhat watches quietly. She always does during this part. The scent rises, warm, full. It fills the room slowly, like a rising tide. You can feel it seep into the bricks, into your clothes, into your bones. That is what keeps you here. Not the money, not the praise, certainly not the ever-growing pile of rejected client requests. You're still haunted by the man who wanted a perfume that smelled like the feeling of winning at dice. It's this. The moment the scent becomes something more. The workshop goes quiet. Even the goats outside stop arguing. For just a breath, the world softens. You cap the dish and set it on the cooling shelf, letting it rest. It will steep another night before it's ready, but you already know this one's special. You stretch your back, feeling the weight of the morning settle into your shoulders. Time for a break, maybe some food, maybe not. You look toward Shamhat. Hungry, she considers, only emotionally. You toss her a date from the jar. She catches it with surprising grace, then promptly drops it. You settle at the edge of the doorway, warm breeze filtering through the screen. In the distance, temple bells ring out, subtle, echoing. It's almost time for midday rites, which means someone, somewhere, is going to need a fresh cone, anointing oil, or just something that smells less like goat. But for now, you rest. Lunch arrives in the usual way, late, lukewarm, and accompanied by a small, aggressive goat with the soul of a thief. His name is Tyloo, though no one remembers giving it to him. He's just always been Tyloo, like a storm or an inconvenient comet. Shamhat hands you a bundle wrapped in fig leaves, barley bread, a handful of dates, and a dollop of bean paste that tastes better than it looks. You sit cross-legged on the perfumery roof, the sun pressing gently against your back. The air smells like dried herbs and ambition. Tyloo eyes your bread. Don't even think about it. You warn, tearing a piece. He thinks about it. Lunch is sacred, not for its contents, but for the moment it creates a rare pause in the thrum of requests, deliveries, and accidental fires. Up here, you can see beyond the shop's courtyards, rooftops stacked like steps, linen sheets flapping in, the breeze, birds wheeling lazily overhead. The ziggurat looms in the distance, a holy stairway, or, depending on your mood, an oversized storage facility for divine expectations. Below, the streets pulse with midday energy. A vendor sings about pomegranates. A priest argues over incense. Pricing a child with a wooden chariot races past, squealing. You chew slowly, watching it all pass like a play that never ends. Shamhat joins you, clutching her own lunch packet and chewing with theatrical enthusiasm. Did you know Tyloo ate a scroll last week? She says. You glance at the goat. He belches softly. What was on it? Something about lunar ointments. I think we lost the whole Moonskin series. Great. Guess we'll just wing it next. Eclipse. Fun fact. Babylonian medical texts often included scented salves and ointments for everything from headaches to heartbreak. Some even listed specific planetary alignments for optimal effectiveness. You've tried half of them. Some work. Some just make your knees smell like garlic. Tyloo attempts a sneak attack on Shamhat's dates. She elbows him, still chewing. You know, she says between bites, we could train him to deliver packages. To whom the gods? She shrugs. Might improve our divine standing. You chuckle and toss Tyloo a crust. He snatches it, mid-air, the embodiment of smug satisfaction. You lean back, arms behind your head, the sun warming your skin. For a moment, the world is soft, peaceful. Even the temple bells seem less urgent. The wind picks up, bringing with it a scent that stops you mid-thought. Charred resin, someone's burning incense nearby, not one of yours. Too acrid, too sharp. You wince. Do we know who's selling that new myrrh blend near the fish market? You ask. Shamhat makes a face. Yes, the guy with the crooked jars. He thinks quantity is a scent. You nod solemnly. We must never stoop to his level. She salutes with her date. You polish off the last of your bread and stretch, joints clicking like old furniture. It's time to go back down, back into the workshop, back into the thick of requests and resins. You descend the stairs slowly, listening to the sounds below you, mortar clinking where you left it, the soft rustle of your notes fluttering near the open window. The air inside the perfumery is cooler now, dense with the morning's work. The cedar infusion has settled, the lotus oil mellowed. Everything smells like quiet potential. You wash your hands in a basin of rose water, the petals floating like sleepy boats. The scent is faint but cleansing, the kind of smell that makes you believe the day can be salvaged no matter how many goats eat your paperwork. Shamhat begins prepping the next batch, something sharp, energetic, temple-bound. You don't even ask what it's for. At this point, your muscle memory blends faster than your memory. Historians still argue whether apprentices were responsible for their own blends or merely assisted. Shamhat has taken a middle road. She blends without asking, and then waits to see if you yell. It's a method. She pulls out the lemongrass and cracked pine. A bold combo. You raise an eyebrow. She smirks. The challenge is accepted. You roll up your sleeves and grab your pestle. Lunch is over. The next act begins. You barely have time to adjust your apron when a temple runner appears at your door, breathless and waving a wax tablet with the urgency of someone fleeing a prophecy. His tunic is askew, his sandals mismatched, and he smells faintly of roasted barley. Whatever he's about to say, you know it won't be relaxing. Funeral, he gasps. This afternoon, high official. They need the embalming perfume. You blink. By sundown, he nods like his neck is on fire. Shamhat appears behind. You, eyes wide. Didn't we just send a batch last week? That was for a minor priest, you say. This one's different. More ... prestigious. Great, she mutters. Time to make the dead smell expensive. You usher the runner inside and send him to sit near the cooling jars. He tries not to touch anything, but he's young and clumsy and already leaning too close to the crocodile fat reserve. You offer him water and tell him to breathe through his nose. Fun fact, Babylonian funerary practices were elaborate. Scent played a critical role not just for masking decay, but for preparing the soul. The belief was simple. If you smell divine, maybe the gods will think you are. You grab your blending tablet. The recipe for funerary balm is old, but every family has their twist. This one, apparently, wants something traditional but elevated. You sigh. That means myrrh, of course, but also something fancy. Maybe juniper. Maybe a whisper of labdanum. You start gathering ingredients like a priest. Before a storm, Shamhat clears the back table, sweeping aside unfinished sachets and one very confused-looking dried fig. You toss her the good mortar. She catches it, barely. We're using the sacred one. We have 2 hours. We need miracles. You begin. The core, crushed myrrh, warm and resinous, not the cheap stuff they'll know. You add cinnamon bark, dried ginger root, and a paste made from balsam soaked overnight in almond oil. It smells rich, like memory and regret. You throw in 2 drops of cedar oil and a whisper of elemi to brighten the base. The runner watches in awe. How do you remember all this? You pause, mostly fear. Shamhat grins, also notes. Everywhere. Check under that jarret, probably. Says, don't forget saffron. It does. You stir the blend slowly, watching as the colors darken, the textures melt together. It's less like mixing and more like coaxing, letting each part find its place in the whole. You test a bit on your wrist. The scent opens sharp, then deepens into something woody, earthy, with a trailing sweetness. Exactly what you'd want to smell like while explaining yourself to the gods. Shamhat begins forming the mixture into small pouches, wrapping them in thin linen strips. These will be tucked into the robes, hidden in the folds. It's not for the living. It's for the threshold between worlds. Historians still debate whether scent offerings were meant to guide the soul or simply impress the divine court. You think it's both. Nothing says take me seriously like smelling like a sacred garden. You cap the last jar and seal it with a red wax stamp. The funerary mark, 2 wings, a tear, and a flame. Shamhat places the pouches into a reed basket, lined with fig leaves. The runner is already on his feet. Tell them it needs to rest before use. You say, 30 minutes minimum. He nods furiously, cradling the basket like it contains live scorpions. Then he's gone, sandals flapping down the street like a duck in distress. The workshop is silent again. You and Shamhat stare at the now empty blending table. The streaks of resin across your fingers, the faint smell of death repelled. That was intense, she says. Welcome to perfumery. You sink onto a stool and wipe your hands with a cloth soaked in rosewater and vinegar. It helps barely. Shamhat sits beside you, eyes fixed on the floor. Do you think they can smell it? On the other side, you glance at the cooling dish. The scent still hangs in the air, warm, solemn, unafraid. I hope so. You say, I hope it reminds them of home. The rest of the afternoon stretches ahead, full of half-finished orders and whispered requests. But for a moment, the workshop is a quiet temple, and you too are its tired, slightly resin-stained priests. The scent of peach hangs in the air, cloying and utterly uninvited. You wrinkle your nose, trying to trace its source, when a muffled thump and a startled yelp echo from the back room. That can only mean one thing. Shamhat's experiment has gone rogue again. You rush past the amphory, nearly slipping on a stray fig leaf, and fling open the curtain. There, half-swooned and blinking in confusion, is the temple scribe, clutching his stylus and smelling like a fruit market in panic. I was just here to drop off the order form. He sputters, nose twitching. Shamhat appears beside him, looking somewhere between sheepish and proud. I might have overdone the musk, might have, you say, waving at the perfumed fog still billowing from the small clay still in the corner. She lifts the lid with a stick. Instantly, the scent intensifies: peach, saffron, and something that smells distinctly like nervous energy. You slam the lid shut before the fig tree in the corner files a complaint. The scribe exhales dramatically. Why does it tingle in my eyelashes? You escort him outside, offering a cloth soaked in vinegar and myrtle to help reset his senses. He waves off your apology with the weary dignity of a man who once passed out in a spice merchant's stall and woke up labeled as cinnamon prophet. Shamhat trails behind you. I was trying to see if I could use dried apricot as a base. Apricot isn't a base, you say, pinching the bridge of your nose. It's a threat. You return to the side room and crack open a jar of neutral rose oil, fanning the air. The peach cloud begins to dissipate. Slowly, you glance at the blend Shamhat was testing. It's thick, golden, still bubbling faintly. There's potential in it if you subtract the part that makes people swoon like fainting goats. Historians still argue whether Babylonian perfumers were scientists or artists. In your shop, it's clearly both. And also a little bit of chaos mage. You bottle the experiment for later study. Scribbling may be useful, may be dangerous on the clay tag. You've got a whole shelf of similar jars, your library of caution. Outside, the sun begins its slow descent. Shadows stretch longer, the temperature drops a fraction, and the city's pulse shifts from frantic to contemplative. Evening ceremonies begin soon, and the temple clients will come trickling in like perfume through papyrus. You return to the front room, brushing resin crumbs from your sleeves. Shamhat is already prepping the evening distillate cedar chips and iris root, something earthy, grounding. A reset after the peach incident. You hand her a pouch of crushed violet petals, a peace offering. Use this, it'll smooth the sharpness. She sniffs it. Smells like poetry, teachers. Exactly. You glance at the tablet the scribe left behind: 5 new orders, all due before tomorrow's third watch. 3 for ritual use, 1 for a healer, and 1 oddly specific for an owl keeper seeking aromatic owl deterrent. You raise an eyebrow. Shamhat shrugs. You know owls don't like cloves. It's going to be a long night. But first, you check the side room again. The scribe's satchel is still on the floor, along with one of his clay styluses. You pick it up, run your thumb along the ridges. He's carved little spiral designs into it, personal flair in an otherwise monotonous job. You leave it on the shelf near the entrance, knowing he'll be back, probably with a poem, or a complaint, or both. You wipe your hands with a lemon-rubbed cloth, and prepare the night burners. The scent must carry, but not overwhelm. It's a balance, always is. Outside, the first temple bells chime, a low, resonant note. You feel it more than hear it. It marks the beginning of the evening cycle, the second most perfumed time of day in Babylon. Right after weddings, and just before tax season, Shamhat hands you the next set of ingredients. Calamus, frankincense, a tiny sliver of cinnamon bark. She's focused now, determined, probably hoping to redeem herself from the scribe incident. You don't say anything. You just hand her the mortar and watch the transformation from chaos to calm. From peach panic to sacred smoke. You're halfway through layering the night cones when the air outside changes. A sudden gust sweeps through the open window, carrying with it temple smoke, street dust, and the unmistakable panic of someone running while holding too many fragile things. The door bursts open. It's a temple aide, drenched in sweat and melodrama. He's holding a basket, barely balanced, filled with wax-sealed orders. He drops it on your bench like it's cursed. Ceremony prep. He pounce. Urgent. Fire god. Everything must burn evenly. You peek into the basket. 5 sets of incense requests, each labeled with varying degrees of desperation. The fire gods writes Nusku, guardian of the sacred flame, demand punctuality and perfection. Anything less might result in divine offense, or at least a very cranky priest. You sigh and roll up your sleeves. Shamhat already has the charcoal going. Fun fact, Babylonian ceremonies didn't just use incense, they ran on it. Specific blends were tied to gods, times of day, and planetary alignments. You've memorized most of them, though a few still stump you, like the one for dream-interrupting squirrels. You'd think that was metaphorical. You hope. First order, high resin, minimal smoke. That's tricky. You grind myrrh with a touch of almond shell ash, adding finely sifted galbanum for lift. You mold the mix into small, compact pyramids that burn slow. And even. Second request, something that calls heat without scorching. You raise an eyebrow. What does that even mean? You blend cedar, clove, and cassia with crushed orange peel, then sneak in a pinch of labdanum. It's bold, spicy, and smells like ambition with a sunburn. The third recipe is missing half the instructions. Shamhat reads the cuneiform aloud. Add the breath of the east wind and a single tear of the prophet. You both stare at it. Poetic, she offers. Unhelpful, you reply, and substitute with juniper and a touch of mint. The fourth blend must be prepared in layers: ground iris root, followed by charred figwood and a drop of balsam oil between each. It takes patience, a kind of scent lasagna. You press each cone carefully, sealing it with a rosewater rinse. It gleams faintly in the lamplight. By the time you reach the fifth order, you're sweating. The fire in the brazier licks the edge of your sleeve. Shamhat tosses you a cloth. You're glowing, she says. Thanks. I smell like holy regret. This final order is labeled Central Altar Blend. Use the sacred ratio. That's the perfumer's equivalent of being handed a bomb and asked to make it smell nice. You dig through your scrolls, find the ancient ratio carved into the margin of an old wine inventory. Of course, frankincense, cinnamon, calamus, and one secret ingredient you were never supposed to write down. You remember it anyway. Powdered, bay seed toasted just right. You mix with steady hands, ignoring the heat, the pressure, the echo of temple bells now ringing fast and close. Shamhat watches as you form the cones, spacing them exactly, brushing the edges smooth with an eagle feather. Do you think they'll notice if one's slightly lopsided? She asks. They'd notice if we gave them last week's anti-burn blend. You reply. Still smells like victory. The aide reappears at the doorway, eyes wide. They're lighting the fires now. You nod. Pack the cones in a layered box of ash and straw, and seal it with your wax-marked crossed reeds, your personal emblem. You hand it over carefully, making him repeat the delivery route twice. No shortcuts, no bumps, and absolutely no stopping for plum cakes. He nods furiously and bolts down the alley. You and Shamhat collapse onto the cool bench, the last of the resin smoke curling through the rafters. Historians still argue whether perfumers were paid in silver, favors, or temple tokens. You'd take plum cakes over tokens any day. But right now, you'd settle for a cold drink and 5 uninterrupted minutes of not touching powdered root. The scent in the workshop has thickened, layered, complex, filled with intent. You can almost hear the fire god's laughter in the crackle of the coals. Or maybe that's just your brain starting to melt. Shamhat fans herself with a broken wax tablet. You know, she says, we just made 5 full sacrificial blends in under an hour. You nod. We're either geniuses or fools. She grins, or both. You smile and reach for the lemon water, hands sticky with sacred ash and pride. Outside, fires burn. Inside, your workshop glows. You've just started scrubbing cone residue from your palms when you hear the voice. It's musical, annoyingly so, like someone who grew up being told they were charming and took it as a lifelong assignment. Great scent work today. The voice says, I could smell your incense from halfway down the temple stairs. Thought the gods themselves were holding a perfume contest. You sigh before turning. It's Naram Silam, merchant of imported silks, dates, and unsolicited compliments. He's smiling, of course. He always is. His tunic is crisp, his sandals too clean for someone who claims to travel. Let me guess. You say, you're here to browse and pretend it's business. Business and pleasure can coexist, he says, placing a small basket on the bench. Inside are 2 pomegranates, 3 strips of dried fig, and a folded scrap of fine linen. Shamhat narrows her eyes. You flirting or paying? Can't it be both? You raise an eyebrow. Depends what you're buying. He leans on the counter like a man auditioning for a romance tablet. I need a perfume oil. Something ... persuasive. Business. Persuasive or bedroom persuasive? You ask. He grins. Let's say complex. Something that makes people curious, engaged, uncomfortable in a good way. So, an attention-seeking oil. Classic. U motion for Shamhat to grab the base oils. Describe your ideal scent. You say, and please don't say victory or sunset. He tilts his head, thoughtful. It should smell like rain, not wet stone, but the moment just before it falls, with something nutty, like almonds, and a finish that makes people tilt their head and say, what was that? You stare at him. So, ... You want to smell like weather and emotional confusion. He beams. Exactly. Fun fact, Babylonian perfumers frequently created personal oils tailored to a client's preferences, even when those preferences were wildly metaphorical. Some scent combinations survive in cuneiform tablets, with entries like fragrance for inspiring admiration and minor jealousy. You select your base, ben oil, clear and lightly nutty. You add crushed almond shells toasted to bring out the scent, then a dash of dried sage for edge. Rain, that's trickier. You simulate it with a few drops of distilled myrtle and a whisper of clay soaked mint. The result, fresh, unexpected, slightly unsettling. You dab some onto a strip of linen and pass it to Naram Silam. He sniffs, raises an eyebrow, sniffs again. It smells like waiting for a secret. He says, you blink. That's actually not bad. Shamhat rolls her eyes. You bottle the blend in a squat vial, cork it, and tie it with indigo thread. Use sparingly, it's stronger than it smells. Like me, he says, sliding a silver ring across the counter. For the effort, you accept it, inspecting the simple spiral design. Not a bad trade. Definitely better than the time someone tried to pay you in beetles blessed by a traveling mystic. Naram Silam lingers by the door, as if expecting applause, or maybe a thank you note. Instead, you ask, so, what's her name? He grins. Which one? Shamhat throws a pouch at him. He laughs and disappears into the street. You shake your head and start jotting down the blend formula. You label it, NS Rain, Almond, Drama. Shamhat stretches, limbs creaking like a drying scroll. We should do more of those. Custom blends. It's fun. It's unpredictable. You say that's the fun part. You pause. She's right. Historians still argue whether scent was seen as a luxury or a language. In your workshop, it's clearly both, and sometimes it speaks in almond and thunderclouds. You clean the tools. The scent of Naram Silam's oil still hanging in the air like a smug ghost. Outside, dusk deepens. The day's last light catches on the amphorae, making them glow faintly. Rose and copper. You breathe in, letting the notes settle. One more blend complete, and just enough time to distill under the moon. Night creeps in like it always does in Babylon, slow, sticky, and humming with promise. The city doesn't sleep. Not really. It just changes tempo. By the time you light the moon lamp in the distillation room, the streets have cooled, and the skies turned the color of wet slate. The stars blink awake, soft and irregular, like half-formed thoughts. You adjust the copper alembic on its stand and settle in beside it, pulling your shawl close against the creeping chill. Tonight's distillation is cedar woodled, the kind that leaves behind smoky fingers on your thoughts. You're boiling it in stages, coaxing out the heart notes slowly, patiently. The oil will be ready by morning. If you stay up and keep it company, Shamhat joins you, barefoot, cradling 2 cups of fig leaf tea. No visitors, no crises, she says, almost suspiciously peaceful. That means the disaster is saving up for tomorrow. You clink cups gently and sip. It tastes like earth and sweetness and overboiled stories. Above you, the moon is pale and full. You stare at it, eyelids heavy. The workshop's rooftop is the only place in the city where you feel taller than your problems. Below, merchants are still shouting, lovers are still whispering, and someone is definitely still trying to sell authentic Egyptian opium that smells suspiciously like overcooked garlic. The distiller hisses gently. Steam curls out, dances briefly in the moonlight, then vanishes. But fun fact, Babylonian perfumers believed that moonlight could influence scent, especially during distillation. Whether that's science or superstition, you're not sure, but you never distill under a new moon. Last time you did, the oil smelled like regret and pickled onions. You lean back on your hands, watching the condensation collect and drip, slow, steady, deliberate. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. The scent is subtle now, but growing woody, clean. Ancient Shamhat lies down beside you on the roof tiles, arms stretched out, fingers grazing the edges of the stars. Do you ever think about leaving? You glance at her. Leaving what? The shop, Babylon, the heat, the goats. You chuckle. Where would I go? Phoenicia, she says dreamily. They have sea breezes and sandalwood wine. They also have taxes and scorpions the size of your foot. I'd name mine Gula, she says. She'd be fierce. You smile, but your thoughts linger. What would it be like, starting over somewhere else? A perfumery on the coast, with gulls instead of owls, salt instead of sand, oils that carry ocean air instead of river dust. But then the cedar oil drips again, perfect, clear, golden. You sniff the air. It's exactly right, exactly yours. Historians still argue whether perfumery was passed down through bloodlines or apprenticeship. In your case, it was neither. Just a chance encounter with a disgruntled distiller, a stolen recipe, and a lot of nights like this one, quiet, fragrant, half magic. You dip a strip of cloth into the fresh oil, letting it soak, then wave it gently in the air. The scent is rich, soft, grounding, the kind of smell that reminds you of old temples, clean sleep, and distant memories that never fully explain themselves. You and Shamhat pass it between you in silence, letting it settle. Somewhere in the city, a dog barks, a drum thuds lazily, someone sings off-key and farted. It blends into the night like everything else. You bottle the first few drops in a small vial, marking it with a crescent symbol. Moon batch. You'll keep this one separate, maybe for your own use. Not everything has to be sold. Some scents are meant for remembering. You look over at Shamhat. She's fallen asleep, one hand still resting near the distiller, the other curled beneath her cheek. You cover her with a spare cloth and return to your post. The moonlight shifts. The oil keeps dripping. And you, the quiet guardian of scent and story, keep watch. The gentle rhythm of dripping oil is broken by the soft creak of the back gate. You glance down from the rooftop, the night wrapped around you like a second skin. Shadows stretched long under the moon, but you recognize the figure instantly. Sandals, who'd drawn low robes far too clean for this hour. Priestess Ninlil. She never knocks. She doesn't need to. She just appears when the streets go quiet and the owls stop questioning their life choices. You descend the steps carefully, trying not to wake Shamhat, and meet her at the workshop entrance. She pushes back her hood just enough to reveal sharp eyes, the kind that see more than they're supposed to. You're still up, she says. I could say the same. She holds out a small pouch, gold cloth, embroidered unmistakably temple. I need something ... specific. You resist the urge to sigh. Of course you do. Inside the pouch is a crumbled wax tablet, barely legible. You hold it to the lamplight. The request is brief. *1 vial, forbidden blend, suitable for private ritual. No substitutions. You look up. You're joking. She doesn't blink. You pull her into the back room, behind the heavy curtain, where you keep the restricted jars. You'll know exactly what she wants. Everyone in the trade does. It's whispered about at night, scrawled on stolen tablets, half-believed and rarely made, aphrodisiac or divine trickery. Historians still argue. They call it the elixir of 9 veils, a perfume so potent it was banned from temple use. Not because it was cursed, but because it worked too well. You pulled the jar from its hiding place behind the fake saffron barrel. It's small, sealed with a red wax emblem, a coiled serpent and a lotus. You haven't opened it in months. Even sealed, the jar hums faintly with tension. You know what this does. You say. Ninlil nods. That's why I want it. You unseal the jar carefully. The scent escapes slowly, like it's thinking about whether or not to trust you. Immediately, the room changes heavier, warmer, more suggestive. The blend is ancient. You don't even remember all the ingredients. Definitely blue lotus, maybe civet, some kind of wine-soaked root, and possibly an oil extracted from the flower that only blooms during lunar eclipses. You never confirm that last part. You draw out a single vial and measure exactly 6 drops. No more. Even that feels like too much. The perfume glows faintly in the lamplight, like dusk trapped in liquid. Don't inhale near open flame. You say, half-joking .ninlil. Watch as you bottle it with reverence. I'll leave double the price. You shake your head. No one pays for this. She slips the vial into her sleeve, nods once, and is gone. Swallowed back into the night, like smoke through a temple vent. You lean against the counter and exhale slowly. Shamhat appears, rubbing her eyes. Was that ... her? You nod. She, take the scary one. You nod again. Should we move? Probably. You reseal the jar, return it to its hiding spot, and stack 3 amphorae in front of it. Just for good measure. The scent still lingers. Shamhat breathes it in and shivers. It smells like secrets with a smile. You nod. And consequences. Fun fact. Many ancient perfumes were thought to have spiritual properties, some for protection, some for desire, some for divine communication. The boundaries were fluid. One priest's sacred oil was another priestess's date-night cologne. You open the workshop windows, letting the cool air sweep through. It dilutes the scent but doesn't erase it. Nothing truly does. You sit down and begin writing the night's notes. You'll mark the transaction in your private ledger, the one hidden under the fake salt inventory tablet. Not that you think anyone will come asking, but if they do, it's better to pretend you sold fig paste to a mysterious visitor than admit you handed over Babylon's most controversial fragrance to a woman who prays barefoot in moonlight. Outside, the stars flicker like guilty memories, and somewhere across the river, a ritual begins. You sit with your back against the cool wall, the scent of forbidden perfume still tracing lazy spirals through the air. Shamhat has gone back to the rooftop, muttering something about too many secrets for one ground floor. You remain where you are, hands idle, eyes drifting toward the corner shelf, the old recipe book with the grease stain. Technically, it's not a book. It's a stack of clay tablets, bound together with twine, and a sense of unresolved tension. You inherited it from your mentor, who claimed it was copied from an original belonging to a temple perfumer during the reign of Hammurabi. He also claimed he once had dinner with a fire sprite, so you take it with a grain of natron. You flip to the middle tablet, where a splatter of old resin partially obscures the script. It's written in a hybrid of Akkadian and what appears to be someone's bored shorthand abbreviations, squiggles, the occasional doodle of a goat. But there it is, the recipe with the crocodile fat. You trace the cuneiform with one finger. Asterisk for longevity and curious effect. Base of almond oil, crushed mint, powdered iris bulb, and rendered crocodile fat aged 3 days in sun. Asterisk, you wince. It's not the weirdest thing in the book. That honor belongs to the perfume of reversal, which supposedly made its wearer forget the last 3 conversations they'd had. But this one has always intrigued you. You rise slowly, stretch, and move to the storage amphorae. You do have crocodile fat, a tiny bit, acquired last year from a trader who insisted it was from a holy specimen. You paid in rose oil and a mildly sarcastic blessing. The fat is stored in a tiny jar, sealed with wax and marked with a crude sketch of a snout. You open it carefully. The smell hits instantly sharp, earthy, with a strangely sweet undertone. You grimace. Shamhat would call it haunting. You call it a mistake waiting to happen. You add it to the mortar with the other ingredients, mint, iris, and just a touch of honey to stabilize. As you grind, the blend shifts from pungent to oddly compelling. It starts to smell ... ancient, not old. Ancient, like something you weren't supposed to remember, but do. You test a drop on your wrist. It blooms slowly. At first, you recoil, then you sniff again, and again. It's weirdly good, not sexy, not soothing, just fascinating. The kind of scent that makes people stare for one beat too long, unsure if they like it or if they've just been cursed. You label the jar Crocodile number 7 and set it next to your other questionable but promising experiments. Then you write a note beside it. Test on someone other than self. Outside, the moon shifts slightly in the sky. You feel it in your bones. The night is tilting toward its quietest hour. When the wind rests and the cats become philosophers, Shamhat calls down from the roof. What's that smell? History, you call back. Smells like lizard. You grin and return to the shelf. The next tablet details an oil meant for negotiations. It lists chamomile, cardamom, and sweat of agreement. You assume that's metaphorical. You hope. You read on, half-dreaming, mind drifting between the lines. Historians still argue whether Babylonian recipe texts were meant to be followed exactly or interpreted like jazz. You've always seen them as conversations across time, perfumed whispers from hands long turned to dust. You flip another tablet and laugh softly. There it is. In scribbled Sumerian, *, do not make this one again. It made the high priest cry. *, you wish you knew why. But some things like crocodile, fat, and temple gossiper, better left mysterious. You're recorking the crocodile experiment. When it happens, the sound that strikes fear into the heart of every seasoned perfumer. Shattering clay, followed by a splash, and then silence. You freeze. Shamhat freezes. Somewhere near the oil shelf, the silence deepens thick, accusatory, and already scented with disaster. You don't speak, you just walk, carefully, one step, another. You round the corner, and there it is, a shattered storage jar. Once home to your prized Udrose blend, now a glistening mess on the floor. The air pulses with fragrance-rich, velvety, too much too fast. It's the scent equivalent of someone singing opera in your ear, while setting fire to your drapes. Shamhat peeks over your shoulder. I didn't do it. I didn't say you did, but I probably did. You sigh and kneel, checking the damage. Half the oil has soaked into the reed mat. The rest glistens on the stone floor, creeping under the shelves, trying to perfume your sandal soles for the next decade. You grab a handful of linen scraps and begin blotting. Shamhat brings the chalk. Together, you draw a circle round the worst of it, muttering the perfumer's informal oath. May the scent be contained, and may my dignity survive. Fun fact, Babylonian perfumeries had no formal ventilation systems. Scent disasters like this were mitigated with vinegar rinses, sand scattering, or if you were desperate, burning bitter herbs. Until someone passed out, you opt for vinegar. The smell swirls into oud and sour sharpness, fighting for dominance like three exes at a dinner party. You reach for your sandal and realize it's too late. The right one already smells like royalty in crisis. You sigh and tip it into the rinse basin. Shamhat is now aggressively sweeping the spilled oil with powdered charcoal, your standard last resort neutralizer. It helps, a little. The scent dulls to something vaguely resinous, a ghost of its former glory. I loved that blend, you say quietly, staring at the splotch. It loved too hard. She replies. You glance at the other jars. Some survived the splash zone, others ... not so much. You start separating the contaminated ones, marking them with a quick R for ruined or revise. One of them your sandalwoodiness, blend as a goner. You unstopper it, take one final whiff, and gag. It smells like a wealthy shoe made a bad decision. Shamhat says. You laugh, a little too hard. The chaos begins to subside. The air still smells like overcommitment, but it's bearable now. You collapse onto the nearest stool. Hands stained, sandals off, pride dented. Shamhat opens a drawer, pulls out a wrapped bundle, and tosses it at you. What's this? Emergency. Scented sandals. You blink. You made these. I have hobbies. You unwrap them, simple leather, but lightly rubbed with a blend of mint, clove, and something floral. They smell ... confident, as if they belong to someone who knows how to deliver bad news in a soothing voice. You slide them on. Not bad. They're called meeting with important people while pretending you didn't just cry. She says proudly. You laugh again. Tension fading. Historians still argue whether perfumers were responsible for scenting clothing directly, or just the person inside it. You do both. Sometimes it's the sandals that save the day. You return to the wreckage. With the worst of the mess cleaned, you place a few of the surviving jars in a sunbox to air out. The crocodile fat blend is safe. The gods. So is the moonbatch cedar. But the sweet myrrh you'd been aging for months. Gone. Just a smear on the wall and a cautionary tale. You etch a new line into your private rule tablet. Asterisk, asterisk, Rule 38. Never store valuable blends at knee level. Goats, elbows, and gravity don't care. Asterisk, asterisk, Shamhat makes tea. You mop up the last of the oil together. You sit on the bench, sipping quietly. The air still humming with unintended opulence. Outside. A cool breeze stirs. Inside. Your sandal soles whisper like new beginnings. The silence doesn't last. It never does. You're just beginning to restore orderly labeling jars. Resorting your sandalwood stash. Try not to cry over the ruined Merwin. A faint thump echoes from the back shelf, followed by a hiss, a squonk, and the unmistakable sound of something flammable doing what it does best. You and Shamhat lock eyes. No, you whisper. Yes, she replies. You bolt to the back room. There it is, a cloud of orange-tinted vapor hanging in the air, like spicy guilt. And in the center of it, your apprentice's secret experiment, a bubbling cauldron of what looks like clove, chili, and powdered cinnamon barks, smoking merrily as the temple owl flaps in furious protest, now visibly coated in fine, glittering spice. Why, you ask slowly, is the owl spicy? I was working on a festival blend, Shamhat says from behind you, voice high with nervous hope. Something celebratory, a warm explosion of scent. I called it. It smells like baked aggression. I was going for joy. Maybe joy had a tantrum. The owl lets out a very pointed hoot and attempts to preen, smearing cinnamon across its flank. It now resembles a sacrificial poultry dish, minus the dignity. You usher the poor creature outside and dump a bowl of vinegar near its perch. It glares at you as if to say, I will never forget this. Fun fact, Babylonian temples kept owls as both pest control and spiritual omens. Scenting them was not part of the traditional job description. You return to the room, where the cauldron still simmers. You uncap the lid. A wave of hot, eye-watering spice rises, slapping your sinuses awake. Did you test this? Shamhat shrugs. Kind of. I didn't inhale. You ladle out a sample and add a splash of almond oil to dilute the fury. Then, you dab it on a test cloth and wave it toward your nose with great caution. It's intense. Cinnamon, clove, something smoky and sharp. It smells like holiday joy turned hostile. Not terrible, but not exactly temple safe either. It might work, you admit, for scaring off very specific spirits, or rebellious owls. You mark the jar with a skull and a question mark, then place it beside the other cautionary blends. Your private shelf of ambition. Shamhat is wiping owl dust off her apron. It was supposed to be called fire blessing. You nod. I think it might actually be arson in a bottle. She grins. Success then, you sigh. Put it on the maybe list. You open the windows again, letting in the cool night air. The scent of disaster swirls out, replaced by the fading aroma of cedar and jasmine from earlier blends. Slowly, balance returns, but the owl remains offended. Perched on the lintel, it watches you like it's drafting a letter to the priesthood. You retrieve your old blend book and flip to the section labeled Seasonals and Warnings. You add a new entry. Asterisk, asterisk, no, 74. Fire blessing, Shamhat, variant, cinnamon, clove, cayenne, and regret. Owl tested, owl disapproved. Asterisk, oustide. The city has dipped into true night. The stars are sharp now, clear. You can hear the faint sound of a flute, laughter echoing from a rooftop feast, and the lazy splash of water in a public bathhouse down the street. You lean against the doorframe, inhaling what's left of your sanity. Shamhat joins you, arms folded, chin lifted. You know, if we market it right, it might sell. You mean lie. I mean rebrand. You consider it. Festival of the First Fire. She nods. Maybe put it in a red-glazed bottle, with a warning. Of course. The owl huffs. You raise your cup and salute to it. To survival and spicy ambition. The owl blinks once. You think that means forgiveness, or a curse. Hard to tell with owls. The wind shifts again. The workshop sighs, and you, still barefoot and cinnamon-scented, return to your bench. Because tomorrow, someone will come asking for a scent that smells like joy set on fire. And thanks to tonight, you're ready. The scent of cinnamon still clings to your sleeves as you make your way back to the front of the workshop. The owl has relocated to the roof, where it continues sulking with theatrical silence. You don't blame it. If someone had turned you into a walking incense cone, you'd need a moment too. Shamhat hums as she starts tidying up, moving jars into their places with a rhythm that suggests she's trying very hard not to laugh. You let her have it. She's earned at least one smug moment today. You check your tablet of outstanding orders, just 3 left. All minor. A small vial of anointing oil for a visiting healer, 2 sachets for a merchant's sleeping chamber, and the soothing blend for nervous livestock you've been ignoring since dawn. You gather the ingredients for the anointing. Oil first. Simple. Clean. Olive oil base, petals of rose and calendula, a drop of frankincense. It smells like renewal, like fresh starts. You cap the vial and seal it with yellow wax, the traditional marker for healing blends. 1 down. Next. The sachets meant to ward off nightmares and dry throats. You chuckle. That's quite a combination. You blend lavender, sage, and a trace of mint, stuffing the mixture into tiny linen squares tied with blue thread. Sleep pouches. You almost want to keep one for yourself. Then there's the livestock blend. You stare at the tablet again. It really does say, in terrible handwriting, asterisk for goats who panic during storms. Asterisk. You sigh and head to the back shelves. Fun fact. Babylonian farmers sometimes requested specific scents to calm their animals: perfumed blankets for oxen, calming herbs tied near lambing pens, and once, a cologne for a prized rooster with anxiety. You thought that one was a prank. It wasn't. You mix thyme, a touch of chamomile, and the last pinch of lemon balm. You crush it into a soft paste and pour it into a jar, labeled Goat Calm No. 2. You tried No. 1 once. The goats tried to eat the jar. As you finish sealing the final package, you glance around. The workshop is still not clean, not quiet, but balanced. The benches are mostly cleared. The distiller hums faintly. The moonbatch cedar nearly done. Even Shamhat has stopped rearranging the spice jars alphabetically. You roll your shoulders. The fatigue settling into place. There's resin in your fingernails, mint oil on your elbows, and you're not sure if your new sandal still smells like confidence and clarity or fennel soup. It's been a long day. You retrieve your cleaning clother, worn scraps soaked in a mix of vinegar and crushed marjoram, begin wiping down the benches. It's a ritual more than a chore, a way to reset, to draw a line between what was made and what's next. Shamhat joins you wordlessly. Together you scrub, sort, and stack. The mortar go back to their shelves. The labels are the questionable blends. Shelf is dusted with a reverence normally reserved for prayer tablets. Historians still argue whether perfumers followed a strict closing ritual, or if each workshop had its own method of ending the day. You believe in ceremony, not for the gods, but for your own peace of mind. You step into the wash alcove and rinse your hands in warm water, scented with dried bay and a slice of lime rind. The scent is soft and grounding, the kind that makes your muscles relax. Even if your brain refuses to follow, you towel off with a reed cloth and stretch, listening to the faint pops of your joints realigning. Is it just me? Shamhat asks, yawning, or does the air feel tired? It should, you reply. It's been busy all day. She pads over to the entryway and slides the bolt across the door. No deliveries, no disasters. Yet, you mutter. She lights the final oil lamp, the one you only burn at closing. It's a blend of lemongrass and spikenard, your own little signature. The scent that says, asterisk, not now, come back tomorrow, asterisk. You sit by the window, watching the shadows settle. The owl hoots once, soft, accepting. You look around. The oils are quiet. The air is full but not loud. Your fingers smell like 10 different dreams, and you wouldn't have it any other way. The night air is cool, now cooler than you expected for this time of year. It slips in through the window slats and folds itself into the corners of the workshop like an old friend, who doesn't say much but brings comfort just by being there. Done. Officially. All orders bottled, sealed, labeled with twine and wax. Every tool rinsed and dried. Even the sandal scandal has resolved. Your new pair sit beside the door, lightly dusted with lavender ash, but still presentable. You should go to bed. You dan single quotes T. Instead, you unroll your mat and stretch out beside the still warm distiller, letting your muscles sink into the familiar reed-woven texture The scent of cedar clings to everything: your clothes, your hair, the backs of your knees. You don't mind, it's a good scent. One of your oldest companions, Shamhat, has fallen asleep in the corner, head tilted awkwardly against a folded apron. She snores softly, probably dreaming of flying goats and perfectly balanced floral blends. You let her be, she's earned it. The oil from the moon batch is done. You decant the last of it, working slowly, carefully, so as not to disturb the peace. Each drop is a small success, a quiet celebration, the kind of scent that doesn't shout but hums a lullaby in oil form. You seal the amphora, mark it with your moon symbol, and carry it to the shelf reserved for personal reserves. This one won't go on the market. Not yet, maybe not ever. Some oils are made to keep. Fun fact, Babylonian perfumers often kept private collection scents made for no client, no ritual, no ceremony, just to remember a feeling, a night, a season, a moment where everything felt strangely right. You lie back down, head resting on your arm. The sounds of the city at night are soft, now distant carts, water lapping at the canal, edge a flute playing off-key near the ziggurat. Somewhere, a cat yelps. Tailu, the goat, snorts once, dramatically, and flops over on the other side of the door. The incense from earlier lingers, barely there, ghost of labdanum and galbanum, soothed by lavender, grounded by cedar. You close your eyes and follow the notes like breadcrumbs. They lead you back through the day, the early morning grind of iris root, the scribe fainting into the peach fog, the priestess with moonlight in her voice, the owl still low-key, furious and glittery. It all plays again behind your eyes, not rushed this time, just drifting, like smoke, like memory. Shamhat murmurs something unintelligible and turns over. Her foot knocks over a jar. Empty, thankfully. You smile without opening your eyes. Historians, still argue whether Babylonian perfumers dreamed in scent. You're inclined to believe they did. You know you do. Your dreams never have voices, just places, feelings, and smells. Rain on old stone, bread baked over almond wood, the sweetness of lotus pressed into papyrus, the powdery grace of crushed violet in the hands of someone trying not to cry. You shift slightly, nestling deeper into your mat. The clay floor is hard, but familiar, safe, like a promise you made to yourself years ago, and somehow kept. The owl hoots, again, this time, softer. You inhale, and smile, your world mad. Fragrant hilarious is finally still. The horizon begins to soften. You don't see it, not at first. You feel it. The air changes, not temperature, texture, like the city is inhaling slowly, preparing for light. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster tests the acoustics of his regret. Another answers. The ritual has begun. You stir gently on your mat, one eye opening, then the other. The workshop is still draped in pre-dawn quiet. Only the tips of the amphorae catch the faintest hint of grey. Shamhat is curled up like a cat, wrapped in the same apron she used as a blanket. You'd think she's dreaming, possibly about sandal marketing. You sit up, every joint politely protesting. Your hair smells like cedar and a hint of clove. You stretch, crack your neck, and rise slowly, respectfully. The perfumer's body ages in strange ways, not in years, but in steps between pots, in hours over the fire, in pounds of ground resin and years of breathing other people's anxieties. Outside, the streets are still shadows, but the sky is less black, now more like indigo smudged with pearl. You light the first lamp, its wick soaked in lemongrass oil, and place it near the mixing table. It hisses gently, casting a soft glow across the mortar, still stained from yesterday, or maybe the day before. You don't scrub it, not yet. Instead, you head to the still. The moonbatch cedar oil cooled perfectly overnight. The top layer gleams, golden and unbothered. You unseal it and pour just a drop onto your wrist. It opens, slowly woody.com. Familiar. You breathe deep. This is what beginnings smell like. You move through the motions now with ease, almost grace, wiping benches, sorting jars, tucking stray threads back into their labels. The chaos of yesterday doesn't vanish, it settles, folds itself into the walls, becomes part of the foundation. The mess, the mistakes, the owl part of the scent of your life. You pour water into the basin and rinse your hands. The cold startles you awake. The rose petals float again, as they always do. From the roof, a soft voice. Morning already. You smile. almost. Shamhat descends like a sleepwalker, hair pointing in 7 directions, eyes still full of stars. She sits beside the fire pit and hugs her knees, same as yesterday. She asks, "You consider?" "Same as always, but different." She nods. The fire crackles to life under your palm. You add fresh wood. The first distillation of the new day will begin soon, but not just yet. The light continues to change. The streets slowly stretch and yawn. Somewhere, a baker stumbles into his dough. A temple acolyte sneezes while lighting incense. A merchant curses the gods for the price of nut oil. You sip from your morning cuppily steeped tea with a hint of mint and fatigue. It tastes like waking. You press your fingers against the shelves, counting the jars. You know each one by heart. You remember what they're for, who they were made for, which dreams they contain. Some dreams are for seduction, some for prayer. Yours are for scenting the ordinary, so it feels sacred. You sit again, beside the hearth. Shamhat's already sketching a new label design in the soot with a stick. Something involving a goat wearing earrings. You let her have her moment. Historians still argue whether Babylonian perfumers understood the weight of their work, whether they knew they were preserving emotion, memory, time itself distilled into droplets. You think they did. You think you do. Outside, the sun breaks the horizon gentle pink, a spill of light over clay and shadow. The city exhales. You rise to your feet, and begin again. You sit quietly now, in the soft cradle of morning. The fire has died down to embers. The jars are silent. Even Shamhat, who never stops moving, has gone still, curled up once more, this time with her head resting against the bundle of clean linen. Her breath is slow, steady, the rhythm of someone dreaming gentle things. The air inside the workshop is calm. Faint scents linger in the corners, traces of rose and cedarwood, the ghost of that moon batch oil, a distant breath of clove that clings like memory. Outside, Babylon wakes without urgency. The sky has shifted from pale pink to washed gold. Somewhere, a bird calls lazily. The wind, when it moves, does so like it's afraid to interrupt. You stretch one last time, arms above your head, joints sighing, and let your hands fall back to your lap. Everything is ready. Nothing is rushed. The oil can wait. The incense can wait. Even the prince can wait. Just this once, you close your eyes, letting the warmth of the new sun settle over you like a promise. The scents of the night remain with you, gentle and sure. They don't press, they don't fade. They just hold. Inhale and let it go. Exhale and let yourself drift. You are safe here. You are home. The gods are quiet, and so are you. Good night. Perfumer. Sleep deep. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.